Hi, everyone. Welcome in. I'm Layla Doty, Senior Privacy and AI Analyst at the City of San Jose. Welcome to the GovAI Coalition's March All Hands meeting. Feel free to introduce yourself in the chat with your name, organization, your role, maybe what the weather is like where you're at today. For today's agenda, we're going to be starting off with a couple announcements, and then we're going to be having a really exciting and I think timely discussion with Kate Stoll from the American Association for the Advancement of Science about data centers and the environmental impacts of AI. So stay tuned for that in just a couple minutes. And then after our Q&A discussion, we're going to, as usual, we're going to wrap up with updates from each of our committees. Can go to the next slide. Awesome. So if you're new to the GovAI Coalition, just want to say welcome. We're really happy to have you here. We are a collective of over 900 local, state, and federal agencies and 3,000 government practitioners, all committed to advancing responsible AI adoption and governance in the public sector. And to do that, we create space for colleagues to talk shop about what they're seeing around AI in their organizations and learn from each other. We publish resources to help agencies kickstart their AI governance journey in their organization, among many other different activities. So just as a quick reminder for everyone, this is the current structure of the GovAI Coalition on the screen right here. And the bulk of the work that we do in the coalition takes place in committees. So at the moment, we have 6 committees, and each one focuses on a different aspect of responsible AI. So you're going to hear updates from each of these committees in the second half of this meeting. But again, if you're new here, there's a lot of information that you're going to hear during this meeting that you're going to see on our website, and it can all definitely feel overwhelming. So we recommend checking out the starter guide that the coalition has put together, which will just help walk you through some of the core policy templates and the work that we do and orient you on how you can best jump in and start to learn and contribute. And you can find all of the committee meetings and the Zoom information on our Google Calendar. And I think our team is going to drop that in the chat if they haven't already. And if you run into any access issues, you have any questions, feel free to reach out to our San Jose team directly. Okay, so I think we're done with the housekeeping, so we can move on to announcements. So first is that the March newsletter is out. I think it was emailed to everyone about an hour and a half ago, just today. So look out for it in your inbox if you haven't seen it yet. And in this edition, we introduced 2 new coalition resources that were just released. We also share, as usual, the latest AI policy, AI industry news that's happening. But just a quick sneak peek on the next slide to one of the new resources, which is Albert, oh, perfect. So one of the new resources is a part 2 of the AI upskilling guide that was released last month. So last month, the first guide that was released covered really the foundational elements of getting your organization ready to engage in training and upskilling activities. And so this month, the part 2 includes all of the actual content that you can use to upskill your staff. So it shows you how to implement a 12-week training program to develop AI experts within your organization. So you can check it out via the link and the QR code that's on the screen there. But there was a lot of work that went into creating this part 1 and the part 2 of this upskilling guide. So want to give a huge shout out to the Readiness and Adoption Committee, and in particular, the members on the screen who volunteered their time and their expertise to put this resource together and help other agencies train their staff. So thank you guys so much for putting this together. Awesome. And our other new resource is called Key Questions to Ask When Considering Data Centers in Your Community. And this resource was created by the AAAS Center for Scientific Evidence in Public Issues, or Epicenter, along with the National League of Cities and our very own GovAI Coalition. And so in this resource, you will find questions that local leaders and community members can be asking about how new data centers in their community might be impacting things like energy, water, air, local economy in the region. And we're actually going to be talking more about all of these questions in just a couple minutes with our featured speaker for today. But there is one more announcement. that we have to make here at the top. So in the newsletter, we also included a very important save the date. So we are very excited to announce the dates for the 2026 GovAI Coalition Summit. This is going to be the third annual Coalition Summit, which is crazy to imagine. It feels like this work just started yesterday. But our third summit is going to be held on December 9th through December 11th this year at the San Jose Convention Center. So we really hope that you can join us. This conference has, I think, really become the coalition's flagship event where we get to connect with our colleagues in person and build a more responsible AI future together. So it's always a great time. The energy and the vibes are lots of fun, and we hope you can join us. So more details will be shared soon, and we will let you all know when registration is open so you can secure your seat. But for now, please save the date for the GovAI Coalition Summit. Awesome. Okay, so I think those are all of our announcements for today. And with that, we're going to move on to our featured speaker section. So, like I mentioned, one of the topics that has started to receive a lot of attention over the last year or two is data centers. From their impacts on electricity rates to water consumption to the revenue that data centers can bring to cities, to things like noise pollution. There's a lot of information out there and opinions for us all to kind of sift through. And so this topic has been coming up in some of our committees and, I think in the chat at some of our past coalition-wide meetings. So today we really want to take a moment to spotlight this issue to hopefully bring some clarity to it and equip our government practitioners with some key things that we should all be thinking about when it comes to potentially bringing a data center to a community. And from that perspective, there's really no one better for us to have join us for this conversation than Kate Stoll. Dr. Kate Stoll is a project director at the AAAS Center for Scientific Evidence in Public Issues, or the Epicenter, as we like to call it. Kate served as the senior policy advisor at the MIT Washington office from 2014 to 2022. And prior to MIT, she served as a congressional fellow with the U.S. House Committee on Energy and Commerce. So, Kate, thank you so much for being here with us today. It's really been just a pleasure to collaborate with you and with the National League of Cities on this new resource about questions that we can be asking when communities are considering a new data center. And, as you know, we're the GovAI Coalition. Our mission is really centered on promoting responsible AI adoption and governance for the public sector. So we're all about AI. And so I want to start off by asking you if you can maybe shed some light on, like why are we having this conversation at the coalition meeting today? What do data centers have to do with AI? And why is this something that should matter to folks in the coalition?
Yeah, thanks, Layla, and thanks for having me, Layla and Albert, and the whole GovAI Coalition. I'm such a huge fan of all the work you all have done, and very appreciative that we were able to partner with you on this new resource, which we'll talk about at the end. Um, but yeah, to answer your questions, um, data centers are really the physical infrastructure needed to run AI and other computing services. So these are these facilities that house all the servers and networking equipment, data storage, and all the systems needed to keep everything running and cool. So data centers are used both to train AI models and for AI inference. There's actually lots of kinds of data centers. In addition to AI-focused data centers, they're also used for cloud computing, cryptocurrency, on and on. You can't, Netflix and chill without data centers. And you also can't AI without data centers. I'll make that into a verb. Um, and data centers can range from, like small enterprise data centers that could draw a few megawatts of energy at any given time to hyperscalers, which can draw over 100 megawatts or even over a gigawatt of power, which we're hearing more about in the news, of course. Um, and the growth of data center construction and also how much energy they're using has increased substantially in recent years, with predictions for future doubling or maybe even tripling. It's uncertain. And that's mostly due to the increase in AI applications and also the fact that AI chips use a lot of energy more than other computing activities. They run hot and they need to be cooled to function. So I think there's a few ways to answer why data centers matter to the GovAI Coalition. One is because, many of your cities and towns and counties and states are being approached with requests to build new data centers. So being informed about the benefits and the drawbacks, um, can make you a better civil servant and a community member. And also, given that there are impacts of data centers on communities, both positive and negative, you could argue that data centers are an important component of responsible AI. And so that definitely fits squarely within the mission of the GovAI Coalition.
And like you said, right, it's especially for a lot of our local places, our local governments, this is the power that they have, is the power of this zoning of what our land is used for. And I'm curious, if we dive a bit deeper into that, like what are the opportunities, if I'm thinking about putting a data center somewhere or allowing a data center to be somewhere in my jurisdiction, what are the opportunities? What are the risks I should be thinking about?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll talk about some of the big ones. Some of the big opportunities are increased tax revenue, which can be potentially really substantial. There's job creation, which can be modest, but we can talk about that. There's also the potential for infrastructure investment by data center developers. Um, that's usually a case by case situation, and it can be a point for negotiation. Um, the drawbacks are fairly intense energy and water use. Um, there can be air pollution from on-site generators, which I'll talk about. There can be noise from the cooling systems and the on-site generators. And in some cases, there can be indirect impacts on regional energy prices. It's one factor among many, so we can talk about those. Um, I can give a little bit more detail on each of those points, but those are the big ones that come to mind. Um, so when it
When
comes,
you say
oh,
like
go ahead. Mhm.
no, just when you say like noise, like how how loud are we talking about? Like, am I expecting like a jackhammer? Am I expecting,
Oh.
what should I be thinking about for my residents?
Yeah, it's less of a jackhammer and more of like a constant hum, that
Hmm.
I think can turn into kind of like a quality of life issue. So some people have trouble sleeping or getting headaches. I have to be honest that I've seen less on the research side of the of noise pollution than I have on energy and water and other factors, but it's been
Yeah,
widely reported that neighbors at certain data center facilities don't like the noise that's created. Does that
interesting.
help, Albert?
Yeah, no, that helps a ton. And when I think about like water, for example, it is, like my understanding is there's like seawater, there's like drinking water, there's like recycled water. You know, how does this compare to something like, say, if I'm a big agriculture town,
Hmm.
um, the water consumption that's being used there? Like, how does this compare?
Yeah, yeah. So data centers can definitely use a fair amount of water. It usually comes from the municipal tap in most cases. It can be like they can be requesting multiple millions of gallons of water per day, and that's mostly used for cooling the data centers. Like I said, the chips need to be kept cool, otherwise they fry and it's all over. Um, And there's different kinds of cooling systems in data centers. So some are more water intensive than others. Evaporative cooling, it's not uncommon to be used in data centers and it consumes the most water. It's evaporated, so you basically lose it. Um,
Mm,
and one thing that's important to know about water and data centers is that the energy and water are really inextricably linked. So even if a data center uses water efficient cooling systems on site, those systems inherently use more energy. And so then you also have to look at what's your source of power for that data center. Common sources of energy also consume water. So like nuclear power plants or fossil fuel power plants often use water consumption as well to keep them cool. And so really looking at the big picture of like water use on site, but also water consumption at the source of power is an important
Mhm.
consideration for local leaders to think about. But it can
That's
be, to answer your question, it could be, it's not necessarily always as much as you would consider for like the entire agricultural region, but it's the type of water that gets evaporated away versus um, used for growing crops. So it's they're not quite the same.
yeah, it's important to think about like what kind of water is going into this. Was that water in short supply in my community? And also thinking about, well, there's the data center itself, and then there's also, do I have the power plant? Is that in my jurisdiction as well?
Right.
What kind of water or electricity is that going to take? And right, like these are all just important things, as I think about my balance sheet
Yep.
on pros and cons, what I should be accounting for, especially when I'm talking with potential data centers that are thinking about, either they're thinking about coming in here or to the neighbor next door, for them. That's
Yeah.
okay. Yeah.
And the scientists we talk to, they always emphasize that you really need to think about your peak water usage. That's where you're going to get the most strain on like your municipal water systems, right? So yeah, you
Mm,
want to know how much you're using over the course of a year, but the biggest stress is like during the hottest days of the year. That's when you really need to understand how much water will be used by all your users, including
ooh.
data centers.
Yeah, so I should be checking like how much water is being used on July 4th and see if I can add a data center's worth of water to that. And if we can, then might just be just fine.
Yeah, or you need to there's also options to see if data centers will be willing to invest in increasing water infrastructure capacity.
Mm.
So there's been examples where that's the case. So it's like a point of possible negotiation between local communities and data centers is like, okay, if we're going to be stressed during peak water times, are you willing to invest in building out our infrastructure?
Mhm.
Awesome. While
Yeah.
we're still, sorry, Kate,
Go
go
ahead.
ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say I wanted to touch a little bit on air quality because that's
Yeah.
sometimes a point that gets overlooked. Um, so data centers, they really can't afford to go offline in a power outage, so they all have backup energy sources. Often it's often like diesel generators are on site. And we know that some generators are cleaner than others, but we do know that diesel can produce unhealthy emissions, whether it's like fine particulate matter or nitrogen dioxides or sulfur dioxides. So that's another point where communities should be paying attention to the type of backup generation, how often it's being turned on, and are emissions being measured and are they meeting air quality laws and standards? But sorry, Layla, you're about to say something.
No, thank you for sharing that. I totally agree that I don't see as much in terms of headlines about like air quality. So that's really helpful to learn about. Since we're on the topic of like opportunities and risks, I wanted to ask you if there's anything you could share about the impacts of um, electricity rates on like everyday ratepayers. I think so. Kate
Hmm.
was on the panel that we had at last year's summit actually on this topic, and I think at that time it seemed like maybe some of the research was like a little mixed in terms of like exactly how everyday ratepayers might be impacted by the like massive electricity amounts that are used by data centers. So just curious if there's anything you might share there.
Yeah, so you're right. There's a lot of different factors that go into how much electricity rates change. Um, Certainly, if you're having a bunch of new need for generation, and then you have to build out more power infrastructure, that those costs have to come from somewhere. And so it can be the case that they're spread out among all ratepayers, and so that would increase costs for, residential consumers, for example. Um, but it depends on the region. It depends on the system by which your public utilities are set up. Depends on, safeguards or oversights, perhaps by like public utility commissions. It also depends on if data centers have made agreements where they say they're going to pay the full price of their power, for example, or they're going to pay for any additional capacity that needs to be brought online to ensure that the costs that are essentially due to their increased needs don't get passed on to others. So we're seeing more and more, especially from like the big technology companies who are probably able to make more of these agreements than maybe mid-sized data center developers, for example, making promises around how they will pay for increased capacity to like transmission or other grid infrastructure, for example. And so that is one way that you can reduce rate increases. But yeah, Layla, it's complicated. There's so many different factors, and it's hard to say like this is the one reason your rates have gone up. It's unfortunately not black and white.
Got it. No, that's super helpful. And like, I think what I'm hearing at a high level from what you've just shared with Albert and I and everyone else on the call is that like the impacts are super localized and it's variable depending on what region you're looking at, whether that's in terms of
Yes.
like the geography and how that impacts the type of technology that's used at the data center versus the regulatory environment that like agencies and data center operators are operating within. So I think that's kind of related to the next thing that we wanted to ask you about, which is so, based on these different opportunities and risks that we just spoke about, I imagine that, local agencies are trying to maximize for the benefits and protect against those potential harms and risks. So what kind of policy levers or tools do local governments have at our disposal to kind of tackle those issues?
Yeah, good question. So I definitely agree, even though there's a big push from like the federal level or just technology sector to accelerate data center growth, so much of the governance is happening at the local level. So local governments have quite a few different levers at hand. There's zoning, there can either be zoning by right, which is essentially has the fewest criteria to meet for where you could put a data center, but it's only in certain locations. Or you can have conditional use or special exemption zoning that tend to require more scrutiny or allow for new development on a case-by-case basis. They can sometimes include a public hearing or other some sort of discretionary review. There's also, of course, permitting processes, whether it's for land use, new power generation, the air quality. And then of course, cities can make either new or amend their city ordinances, which could include benchmarks for like energy or water efficiency, um, or setting noise limits, for example, as you were saying, Albert. And then of course, we're seeing more and more use of community benefit agreements, CBAs that these are basically legally binding contracts that describe the different give and take between communities and data center developers. Um, and they can have all sorts of factors included in there. Um, and then, as I mentioned before, aligning tax structures so that they yes, help with economic development in your community, but also make sure that the incentives, if you're offering them, are tied to community benefits. That's one way that local leaders and community, county and state can also be getting the best deals, I guess, for their communities. And then I just also want to mention that even if uh, when you have these ordinances or zoning or all the permits lined up, for example, enforcement is what, in the end, sometimes is what comes down to whether or not noise ordinances are being followed or air quality regulations are being followed. So thinking all the way through from making the rules to enforcing the rules. That was a long slew, sorry.
No, Kate, I love what it feels like we're building here. And, I know a ton of this is covered in the publication that we released together. So huge plug again for folks to check that out. I think we can drop the link in the chat to that in a bit. Um, but it really feels like we're building a bit of a framework here on how to think about this. Like the answer, should I put a data center in my city, is going to be it depends, which is
Mhm.
unfortunately the true, but also feels like a cop-out answer. But the fact is you can think about different aspects of it to determine if it's right for you, right? It sounds like, you know,
Mhm.
how much water am I using on my hottest day? What type of water is the data center going to take? How loud is the data center going to be? Is that, how does that compare to what that neighborhood or that area is experiencing right now? Um,
Mhm.
what might be the impact be on air quality, both the power generation and the data center itself? Can my electricity load handle this? And like, if I can go through those questions and answer them, I might be in a better place to decide yes or no if this makes sense. Um, and that's just really great to think about. So thank you for kind of just building this with us. Um, one one last question that we want to ask just before we turn it to a few audience questions, if we can. Um, who tends to be who tends to be involved in these conversations? And when I say that, I mean like who tends to be the ones from the government side that tends to be making the decisions, right? Because
Mhm.
not everyone on this call is the decision maker. Who should we be engaging on our government side to help make sure that they're informed about what we're learning today? And then, two, on the flip side, how have you seen people engage the community, the other side of this, the people that are being, impacted and served by a potentially a data center, um, getting them involved? So, two parts, like who should we be engaging in our governments, and also
Mhm.
how do we as governments engage the community?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. So there's actually quite a few different players at different levels here. But city councils and county commissioners have a lot of leverage here when it comes to like approving or rejecting new data center development, also setting up terms in these community benefit agreements. And then, of course, setting or amending ordinances that apply to data centers, which, increasingly we're seeing people putting in different factors like efficiency benchmarks for energy or water or noise limits, et cetera. Um, and then another maybe under appreciated player here are like city and county planners. They have a really big role in understanding the interface of data centers with both water systems, energy transmission, transportation and roads, land use, neighborhood, um, and just placement of data centers overall. And they work to, coordinate between different government entities there. Um, and then another group that doesn't usually get a lot of attention, but I think is recently with the big push for data centers are utilities and also public utility commissions. So these utilities are getting the interconnection requests from data centers. They're putting out many requests and trying to get whatever they can because their time to market is so important. And so the utilities understanding their energy forecasts and how many more users they're being brought online is really important and challenging work. And of course, the roles of public utility commissions to have oversight on all of that um, is an important role. It's getting more attention lately too. So those are some of the many players. And then in terms of engaging with communities, I think transparency and engagement can go a long way. Um, and you know, some approaches that might help to get better agreements or negotiate stronger wins are empowering local leaders with and communities with information, which is the goal of this new resource. Um, and then also thinking about more transparent and stronger community benefit agreements. So just to emphasize, I think the goal of this resource is really to empower local leaders, but also community members who are interested in this to ask questions that hopefully will reduce the information asymmetry or the information gap that can sometimes occur between data center developers and communities. Because sometimes it feels like they know all the things that need to be known and not everyone else does in terms of how much energy or water it will be using or how many jobs will be created, for example. Um, So I think really encouraging the use of these and other accessible resources are one way to empower people with information. And then regarding community benefit agreements, um, realizing that there's a lot of different factors that could be included in here that can be negotiated. Um, Whether it's, how many jobs are offered, what types of wages will be offered, training programs so that local residents are hired for the jobs, energy and water commitments, et cetera. I think these are another tool to empower communities to um, make good decisions and do what's best for their communities.
Okay, so we have a bunch of questions from the audience in here. We're not going to get to half of them, let alone all of them. So here's what we're going to do. One, Kate, after we finish this, please take a look and see if there's some that you can respond to in the chat. If you could do that, that would be incredible. And
Yep.
also, we will save these questions, and we will share these with Kate. And if Kate has any moments to be able to answer some of these, we can send that out afterwards to the broader coalition, potentially in our next newsletter or something like that. So we will do our best on these. But in the meantime that we have a couple questions that we got around, let's see, around the environmental effects here, specifically around sensitive habitats. And I'm curious if I have sensitive habitats in my agency, where's a good place for me to start getting smart on the potential impact data centers could have?
Mm, yeah, there's so many, so many resources. Um, I'm happy to point people to a variety of resources on water. Um, the water quality is another issue I didn't raise today, partly because I've seen less information on that versus just water quantity. But there's more and more information thinking about like water discharge and how we want to make sure it's treated properly so that when it goes back into the environment, it is not hurting local ecosystems, for example. So I'll put some resources in the chat there on water. Um, and then energy, the environmental impacts are more about emissions than anything else. So
Hmm.
happy to, I'm not sure if I'm answering that question enough, Albert, but um, there's a
No, no problem.
thousand resources and I'll be happy to put some in the chat.
Awesome. That's perfect. Um, and to the conversation around water, I've seen a few people ask things around like, uh, are there efforts to move away from water-based cooling? Are there
Hmm.
alternatives, recycled water? I think it all kind of is under this umbrella of if a data center is coming to me, what types of things should I be telling them or expecting data centers in my community to do when it comes to water stewardship?
Yes, so great point. So there's a few areas to think about here. There are more water efficient cooling systems. So whether it's like closed loop cooling, so it's less evaporation happening at the site of the data center. There's also immersion cooling, which also uses way less water. But in both cases, they end up hiking up how much energy you need to use. There's no
Mm,
such thing as a free lunch, basically. So
yeah.
then you just need to make sure you're also accounting for if there's water consumption happening at the source or sources of power. Um, but there also are solutions around, yes, water reuse. In fact, I know San Jose has systems around there to make the best use of water and recycle it as much as possible. And then efficiencies in technologies are increasing over time. They're having a hard time keeping up with just the massive upscale of data centers at the moment. But I'm always a bit of an optimist, and yes, they will keep improving over time. And the AI chips will and are getting more efficient as well, needing less cooling. NVIDIA had like a big, rollout of their chips that need less water to cool and that kind of thing, which won't be available for all data centers tomorrow, but there is progress on that front. And then last but
Yeah.
not least, there's different water agreements where data centers are finding ways to restore separate water resources, so you get a net benefit. All kinds of thoughts on that, so we could get into details another time if useful.
No problem, Kate. I really appreciate this. I had another question that popped up and it seemed to garner some interest. Why do cities, there's a lot of conversation around cities signing NDAs when a data center
Mm,
comes in.
hmm
Have you seen this? Is this something that we should be pushing back on? Like how should I be thinking about those?
Yeah, this is a tough one because so so there could be some good reasons for NDAs and then some reasons that are maybe just like trying to escape transparency. So it's somewhat complicated, but in
Mhm.
terms of data centers wanting NDAs, it's mostly because they don't want their competitors to know, like, if you know how much water and how much energy you're using at a single data center site, it's pretty easy to, this is what I'm told, pretty easy to figure out like what technologies you're using there. And so they say they don't want their competitors to know what strategies they're taking. Um, I think it does definitely give communities a sense that they don't have insight into how things are working. They want more transparency. They feel like it's something, it's information they would like to know before their community decides to sign on the dotted line. And so, yeah, it's NDAs have absolutely been a source of contention and disagreement in communities. It'd be great to see more transparency. That's just my personal opinion. I don't imagine we're going to get a whole lot more immediately, but that's one of those things that local, county, and state governments can insist on is greater transparency and um, public information sharing for their communities. But usually you need enforcement to get transparency.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, Kate, we this has been fantastic. Thank you so much. If you're able to answer any questions in the chat, please do. We'll try and compile them afterwards. Yes, a huge round of applause for Kate. Thank you again for taking the time. Um,
Thank you.
and let's see, we're going to push forward here to the last part of our coalition-wide meeting here. Um, that will be committee updates. Right, Kate just walked us through a lot of the work around data centers. This is one of many things that we are tackling and discussing across our committees. And if you really want to be, this is where we raise the questions. If you want to be part of the answers, come join our committee conversations. And again, this is the type of thing. Go onto our Google Calendar, take a look at what committees you want to come join, listen in, say hi, message how you can help, and we'll find places for you. So with that, I'm going to pass it off to Rich, if I see you, for readiness and adoption.
Great. Thanks so much, Albert. And just wanted to give you a few updates here for the Readiness and Adoption Committee. AI training. First of all, our AI upskilling group is rebranding to AI training. So all updates from that group will be under the banner of AI training, and they're going to be the home for all of the Readiness and Adoption Committee's training efforts. So very excited about that shift. And also just to echo what Layla said at the beginning, they've launched their second playbook on delivering AI training to your agency. We're very excited about that. Kudos to Stephen Hill, who has been our primary author of that content, and the rest of the team for providing great edits and feedback, and to Shari Lukman, who has helped with all the graphic elements of that. So very excited to deliver those. The second of those playbooks, we are launching a third playbook in April that's going to be focused on getting started with custom chat GPTs and agentic AI. So very excited about that one coming up as well. Also wanted to mention community engagement is going to be coming into under the umbrella of readiness and adoption. So very excited about that, and very excited to welcome them to the team and create space for them in our ongoing meetings. So we also are expanding our one-on-one adoption support. Sahir, my co-chair in this committee, does a great job on the policy element of doing one-on-one meetings around policy and adoption. But we're also going to be including new one-on-one options to get support around community engagement and data governance. So very excited to expand that capacity as well. We are changing the format of our meetings going forward. The first meeting of every month, we're going to be focused on project check-ins from all of the excellent work that our working groups are doing. And then the second one is really going to be featuring guest speakers that will talk to a variety of readiness and adoption topics and topics of interest and education around those areas. So really looking forward to bringing in some guest speakers into that space. I know community engagement has been really doing a lot of that work as well and bringing in custom speakers to sort of, help us think through issues around community engagement. So we're looking forward to doing that with the broader issues within the Readiness and Adoption Committee. And just a few project updates that AI in the Fire Service. Jim Brown continues his excellent work building out the long form training for AI in the Fire Service. He's finalized lesson 5 on note takers and knowledge management and got a lot of great feedback from the committee about that and potentially repositioning some of that content to a broader audience. So, and then change management, Anmal Rathore, who's from City of South Bend, is kicking off this AI change management working group that's focusing on looking at how AI is impacting the organization, roles, the workforce structure, and how we are going to start assessing performance in the new AI environment and looking at a variety of ways that's impacting change across agencies. So very excited about that. It's in the early stages, and she's gathering data on interest and capacity. So looking forward to more updates from Anmal. So that's it, that high level, Albert. So
Thank you. And excited for the merging and the partnership with community engagement to make sure all of that work, we have a space for people to help adopt this work. And with that, I just want to pass it off. Meg, I saw you on the call. If you or Liz wanted to just give a quick shout out for the Community Engagement Committee.
Yes, this is a shout out to everyone who stopped by even once or who came regularly to the Community Engagement Committee. There was a hardcore group of folks that were co-designing materials, listening to our speakers and engaging toward even creating new resources for the coalition. And we were able to think about, what does participatory design look like in AI? What does co-design look like? Why listen to residents? And even started to bring in some of these environmental topics. So thrilled to see that on the main stage here. We held our last community engagement committee where we celebrated all of our wins and resources that we created together and thanked everyone who participated. And then we collectively set the intention that by joining the Readiness and Adoption Committee, we can help spread the word on how community engagement isn't only something that's nice to have, but can actually be a critical asset early in the process of your pre-procurement ideation journey, understanding what the risks could be of new systems, and helping to address public trust by really listening to residents, listening to their concerns and addressing them and moving forward together. So that will take the form not only of being in the readiness and adoption space, but also joining and supporting the work that Sahar has been doing to do clinics with folks with for folks with questions. So if you are starting to think about what role community engagement could play, we have a handbook for you. We have people at the ready to speak with you. And we're excited to diffuse all the lessons learned. Back to Albert.
Thank you, Meg. Thank you and Liz and the rest of the Community Engagement Committee for putting so much great work together. If you haven't checked out the handbook for how to do community engagement, it takes you through everything from building adoption and support from your leadership to actually executing what's the agenda look like for talking with your community about AI and technology. I can say from the city of San Jose, people see cameras, they see this stuff, they're asking, what the heck is that? And this is an opportunity for us all to build trust between us, our residents, and the technology we use. So again, thank you guys. And so excited to see it grow more through our Readiness and Adoption Committee, as we're going to share a bunch of these conversations and continue that. So, all right. I'm going to be covering the Procurement Committee today. So this is our committee uh, all around how do we actually buy the tools that we are going to be using in our governments and ultimately impacting the way that we serve our communities. It's chaired by Aaron Bushman from State of Colorado, Office of Economic Development, International Trade, and Emily Royale from Partners for Public Good. Uh, a few things that we have seen recently. Um, they have two potentially upcoming presentations on how governments are building their own large language models to support their procurements, specifically around how does it support their evaluations, their risk assessments as they're thinking about all these tools. We hopefully in the next couple of months will hear these demos from two governments. We can't say which yet, as they need some internal approvals, but between that potential work and the shareable contract initiative that we have put together, the coalition has come together to do a evaluation of generative AI tools. So, think about your standard Gen AI tool that you use on the day to day. We have an RFP based out of City of San Jose, but applicable countrywide because we've got evaluators from across the country. That evaluation is underway, and hopefully in the next month or two, we'll actually be able to release more information on that. So excited about the work. And if you are interested in the internal LLMs to support your procurement workflows, come and join them on April 9th. All right, I will pass it to Yar for a quick update on industry relations.
Hi everyone, thank you, Albert. There isn't much new going on with industry relations. It will be a very brief update. That doesn't mean we're not doing anything. There is work being done. First of all, the AI registry and marketplace is still an ongoing project, even though it's still in, it's been launched, but it's still in that beta mode. So we're actively accepting feedback, suggestions, feature requests. Hortus AI, we're working very closely with them on implementing those, and they've been adding a lot of things lately. So I do suggest that, each one of you, if you haven't yet, go and check it out. And if you're just registering, use the code Coalition for access. It's a coupon code that will give you free access. At the same time, if you are already registered, come back and check out the new features and everything else that's been added. It's an ever-changing marketplace. So as we transition into the new phase of GovAI Coalition, and some committees have renamed themselves, we are looking at how we can leverage our relationships with the private sector and the government sector, public sectors, to maybe discuss potential for some new standards in the industry. So that's what we've been discussing recently. I'm sure there will be more updates to follow in the following industry or coalition-wide meetings, but for now, that's it. Our meetings have been moved to quarterly meetings for now, as we figure out our next focus, next goal in this new phase. So our next meeting is tentatively scheduled for April. We will send out an invite once we know the exact date. That's it on our end.
Thank you, Yar. And let's see, do we have Carrie, Nicole, Jamie, Hemant on the call for use cases? Or Not, I think I'm taking this one real quick. So the use cases committee has been going through a bit of a renaissance, if you want to call it that, around how do we as governments vibe code pilots, test things, build our own solutions, see what's possible out there. I highly encourage, if you have not checked them out, the YouTube videos of the most recent use case committee meetings. Fantastic. We're gonna have another demo around vibe coding automation April 7th. Again, you can check out and you can sign up for these in our Google Calendar. Um, and a huge thank you to Nicole Sterling and Melanie for leading us into a deep dive on actually vibe coding live, a potential pilot for something to use in their public sector work around code compliance. So, um, a quick reminder in case you had a manual calendar invite yourself, the use case committee has been moving to only one meeting for the month, the first Tuesday of the month for the next couple of months. So, looking forward to seeing you April 7th. And now I will pass it off. RT or Sarah, if you're on, I'll pass it to you. If not, I'll take
I'm
data governance. Oh,
I'm
perfect,
here,
RT.
Albert.
Thank you.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. We've been working with the adoption committee to really figure out how we can support committee members and, in general, the coalition members to adopt the deliverables that we had from last year, mainly the data sharing template and the data governance template as well, the data governance strategy template. So we sent out this survey to the data governance committee members, but this is open for anyone else to fill. Even if you haven't attended a data governance committee meeting, please help fill this survey out to help us understand where the gaps are in terms of adoption, what the barriers are, so we can work with the adoption committee on that to provide the necessary support to the agencies. That's it from us. Back to you,
Awesome.
Albert.
Thank you, RT. And I want to highlight apologies for folks. We sent out a cancellation for last data governance committee meeting, and it sounds like that did not reach a few folks. So I just want to apologize for that. RT, uh, just if we're able to announce on this call, are we expecting to have the data governance committee meeting upcoming, or will we send out an email on that?
Um, I think we'll send out an email. We do have something
Yeah,
on the calendar, but I'll have to double check on that.
perfect. Yeah. We'll send out notifications on that as well. Uh, so folks, that's all we got for you today. Thank you so much for joining us here on the GovAI Coalition uh, monthly meeting. I have seen so much conversation happening in the chat. So thank you all for engaging. Remember, please take this time, message each other if you want to follow up on your conversations, share with each other your emails. The goal of this is that we're building that community here. Take a look at our newsletter. Again, all of this information and everything that we shared here, the data centers report that Kate and the coalition put together, that is also available, and we have it linked in our newsletter. Check out the key questions to ask around data centers. Watch our introductory video. Bring someone else, bring a friend next time. If you have other people in your government agency or other people that you're working with that are interested, bring them onto the call, get them to learn about this. And that's about it. So everyone, thank you so much for taking the time. I'm going to stay on just for a minute because I know there's a lot of active conversation happening in the chat. And if you want a moment to share emails, I'll let you do that. But otherwise, take care, everyone. Have a great Wednesday. Hope to see you soon.